Well, so let's get started. This is our meeting, October 8th, for the Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Subcommittee. Can I have a roll call for starting a motion of our meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Awesome. Brendan, if you don't mind helping me on who's here for the voting.
Sure. So Nicole Amos,
Yes.
Laura Kirschenbaum,
Yes.
Member Ayala,
Yes.
Member Woodland,
Yep.
Member Bennett,
Yes.
Member Gustafson,
Yes.
and Member Long-Belil.
Yes.
I believe I have everybody.
Yes, and then the chair votes yes too.
Thank you.
Okay, I wrote the attendance down so I can go back on it. So the first item on our list is the approval of the minutes of September 22nd, 2020 meeting. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
So let's go down the list. Member Amos,
Abstain?
Member Christenbaum,
Yes.
Member Ayala,
Ariella, yes.
Member Woodland,
Woodland, yes.
Member Bennett,
Bennett, yes.
Member Gustafson,
Yes.
Member Long-Belil,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So I guess that's almost all except one abstain. So our next item on the list is the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan, which I believe, Brendan, you probably need to take over and give us an update on that.
Sure. So I can pull it up on the screen. So that was sent out to everyone. The draft version that the committee that met last January and February, mostly January, revised. So if you have that in front of you, it would be helpful. I'm also going to try to take minutes and project it on the screen at the same time. But really what this is, so just to remind everyone and people that might be watching, is this was done back in January, and it was a revision of our bullying prevention and intervention plan for the district. The committee, it consisted of various stakeholders, including district staff, administration. We had school committee members, including Member Woodland, and a few other people as well that I could be leaving out, but it was a good mix. We had parents as well on that subcommittee. And the goal really was to look at what we had as a current intervention plan for bullying, make sure that it covered everything that it needed to in order to be a robust plan. And we also aligned it to the recommended format for the Department of Education, which it was not aligned with before, just so it makes it easier for future revisions if we have that aligned. So another piece that we really looked at closely is starting to introduce the language of restorative justice, restorative practices into bullying prevention as a start. So the idea being that if we look at through the lens of repairing harm, so keeping in mind the victim and the aggressor, and giving an opportunity for that relationship to be, if possible, repaired in a way that's acceptable to both parties, if it's two. So we started to look at that, and we do have a lot more work to do in that regard. But so that's really the basics of it. It'll just take me a minute to pull this up, but so I guess this part of the agenda would be for us to have a conversation about that and get feedback, and eventually to hopefully have this subcommittee make a recommendation to the school committee for approving this plan.
Awesome.
Well, I like the concept of restorative justice when it comes to bullying and a lot of things quite a bit. I think it's especially since we're an educational organization, I feel like when students behave in ways that are just wrong, that part of our mission is to teach them why that is wrong and other ways that they can relate to people. So that's my view.
Before we start our conversation, Brendan, were you finished with your overview?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep, that was
Okay.
hoping we move into that. Thank you for asking, though. Yeah.
Any other comments?
Yeah, and Michelle, I'll just jump in here. You know, I'm looking at the policy here, the plan rather. I think it has it's quite detailed. It seems that a lot of thought. Clearly, a wide variety of stakeholders were involved in the development process of this plan. So that's always, I think, a bonus, a plus to a plan when it's created with enough voices, enough differing voices to make it, you know, to make sure that that various constituencies are a part of the process. So I like that piece of it. I think it's got a lot to it. I'm just looking through to see if I had any particular questions. I like that you've got the core values there. If you can go back up, Brennan,
Sure.
I probably do it faster than me. I like that it speaks to our current mission. So it's sort of not only what we're doing, but why we are doing it, answering that question. And everything should come back to that mission. Is why are we doing something? Well, it's because this is what we've set out to accomplish, and this is how we're going to get there. So I like that, and I think that identifying the core values that come from that place is important. That's all I've got for right now. So I just wanted to say that I think that it's good, it's detailed, and it's well thought out.
So I do have one question. I mean, I noticed this was a final draft and honestly, like in March of 2020, right? So
Right.
I'm assuming there was a policy before this. Now, what was missing in that policy that this one addresses? The reason why I'm asking that is because obviously there was issues beforehand in our school systems, and I'm just trying to understand, how does this address the missing loopholes that were found so that we know that, you know, that a lot of the issues that weren't there before are covered now?
Right. So, Linda Woodland, too, if you have anything to add, if we can go back in time to January. I do remember quite a bit. So, I mean, formatting was part of it, but even beyond that, there was a little bit of language within the old plan that referred to students as bullies. So we discussed that at the stakeholder group as being a problem, that it's a much different thing to say a student is a bully than to say they are engaging in bullying behaviors. And we talked about that nuance as being really important because you know, bullying is very serious. We need to take it seriously as a district, and that's why we're looking at this plan. But it's also, we have to remember they're children, and that sometimes our intervention, our investigation as a district, if we don't do that well, it can actually cause more harm to students. So, so we looked really closely to make sure that the investigation process supported students to feel comfortable to come forward with things that are happening to them or to a friend. So that was a major piece of it. Anything else that you can remember?
Yeah,
Linda?
yeah. So why I wanted to be involved in it to begin with was because of that shift in focus. You know, we know that when we see bullying behavior, there's a reason behind it, and I felt like the old plan was very I've said it before, very punitive, very kind of labeling. And then not only that, it seemed like a lot of the onus was put on the victim versus holding responsible the person kind of creating the issue. Maybe this terminology isn't the greatest for how to put it, but that was one of the big problems I saw in the original that before this revision, and a shift into the new revision where it was much more about educating and instead of pigeonholing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of the other conversations was about utility in the school systems, in the school buildings, so that if there is a report, that the administrators can use this document more easily to know what the path should be forward.
Exactly. Thank you. That's a good jog of my memory too, Linda, because you reminded me. So we started to talk really about like skill deficits with kids when these issues come up, and moving away from that punitive mindset. Of course, there are times in here, and you'll see in the plan that there are times where disciplinary action is needed. But disciplinary action should always be in the service of building a skill and understanding something better. So that's embedded now into the document, these learning and life competencies that are for social emotional learning. It's, I think, one of the more powerful two-page documents you can look at. And there's these nice skill sets with competencies and then also target behaviors. So as we look at intervention plans now, we're going to be slowly incorporating these target behaviors that would be on both sides. And, you know, you'll see in here the self-advocacy and things like that too, that are skills that help to prevent bullying in a lot of ways. So I think we really tried to look at things a lot more holistically because it's a very complex issue and we want to do better than preventing bullying. I mean, we want to be building skills for kids really early so that it never ends up in a bullying situation. So yeah, that was a good reminder there, Linda, of what we did talk about. And so we looked with a fine-tooth comb at every word within the document and tried to be very deliberate that it was supportive in skill building.
Brendan, if I can speak to that for just a second as the building principal, the old document walks you through, here's how you do an investigation. And then if you determine it's bullying behavior, you know, you can suspend the kid or call the police. And those options really left you as a building principal really not wanting to call it bullying behavior and trying to call it, because that's awful. You know, certainly at the age group I work with in middle school, we don't necessarily want to be involving the police in any of these situations unless it escalates over time really significantly. This document, as Brendan talked about, gives us a roadmap to not just how do we address that issue, but how do we address it more for a long term, and what are our goals getting at in terms of what we're teaching kids and the behaviors we want them to be able to display and show. And it's a document that we can use with parents and with counselors and with kids and teachers to help guide that conversation and what we want the outcomes to be.
I have one question. I really like this document. I think it really addresses a lot. Like I noticed one of my concerns was, you know, requiring, which we had heard from students, the requirement of, you know, if a staff member or a teacher noticed bullying, that they would be required to report. I noticed that in this document, it clearly says that. But another concern of mine is one of the concerns that kids had was, how will they know that a similar behavior is given a similar response? And that's probably a loaded question, Brendan. So,
yeah,
because, you know, we want to keep the privacy of students and the people involved, but at the same time, how are we addressing that students can be, you know, confident that you know, for this X behavior of this one person is the same consequence of a similar X behavior of another person?
Right. So it's an important question, Asima, and I'm happy to at least initially respond to it. So in my past work, I did a lot of work with looking at codes of conduct and how we respond to problematic behaviors with kids. And one of the important things that is kind of misunderstood at times is it's not always the same consequence or supportive intervention for each kid. It really is individually tailored in the situation. And when you look at, so a restorative practices model, for example, if, and mediation is a big part of that, restorative circles, but mediation is usually what it's called. So if a student that's involved in bullying behaviors does really well in the restorative mediation part of things, it does impact in a good way for them the consequences that they would get, because they're learning. It's clear that they're learning from that experience, where a student that might be just not interested at all in mediation and pushing back pretty hard on that, then it would call for more of a punitive consequence to help them learn from that. So it really is individually tailored, and that's why an important part of this is oversight as well, because I oversee the bullying intervention for the whole district, and I see that as a supportive role for principals and assistant principals who do this investigation. So all the reports come through my office, and I review every single one of them. And even better than that, so I consult often on the more complex investigations while they're happening or as we get reports, just so we can, and I don't have all the answers, it's not about that. It's more at the building level. I know when I was a principal, I always relied on thought partners that were outside of the school. So that's, one accountability piece that I think is important, that all of these reports come through my office and they're looked at very, very carefully. And so I think hopefully that answers it at least a little bit, because it's not.
I was just more
Okay.
concerned, I understand exactly what you're saying, right? It depended upon each student, and we want to keep the privacy and not necessarily shame the person who can be helped in understanding what bullying can do to others, etc. I guess my concern was how do we address those kids who feel that, why am I being more severely punished than someone else who did the same, etc. We heard those kind of comments from students, and I'm just trying to figure out if there was a way, or if there was conversation when this particular document was being written up, if that was part of the conversation of how to address and maybe assure the kids that they are being treated fairly and that each individual case is being looked at in a very fair manner.
Absolutely, and I can start to answer that. I think Chris Lebrecht might have some perspective on this. I was a principal, he is a principal. I could just say one of the most difficult parts of being an investigator of bullying is we cannot be fully open about the interventions that happen to both sides, to parents on both sides and to students on both sides, because of privacy. So I think the unintended part of that is it can seem like nothing is being done. So there are times where I know I've given a consequence to a student, in school suspension, for example, and I was in a big enough school where the student may not be aware that they're, in the office. So that's a tricky part of it, because it's sometimes a perception issue, and I think it's honestly a difficulty of privacy as it comes to this. But I want to give, I don't know if Chris Lebrecht, if you have anything to add to that, but because it is important that students know that their concerns are followed up on. It's just hard because we can't share everything.
So it's, when you talk about discipline, that's the greatest challenge, right? Although every student is entitled to their privacy, and we can't talk about certain kids' consequences for their actions with other students or other families. The one exception is that when your child is the target in a bullying situation, there is some flexibility to talk about the consequences that the aggressor might be receiving within a bullying situation. But that's to the target's family. It's not necessarily to everybody else. I wouldn't want to disclose that information to everybody, and you can't disclose that information to everybody. And sometimes it's really hard because kids have a perception of what they see and what they hear, but it's not always, they don't always have the whole picture. And as much as I would want to tell them what really happens, you can't. So I think we have a lot of work to do across the district to assure our kids that we take every incident and every instance of a kid feeling unsafe seriously, and we address them, all of them, from a perspective of teaching and support, because clearly, based on some of the reports and things that we've heard recently from kids, there's a feeling throughout the district that that's not happening currently.
So what would you recommend as ways we can address that? I'm just trying to figure out, as a subcommittee, what other to-dos we can do to address that concern.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's work that can be done in the school committee subcommittees. I think it's work that needs to be done amongst our administrative team in our meetings. And I think Brendan's done a really nice job of bringing some of that to us, last school year before the shutdown and at the start of this year. The restorative justice practices, This document is another example of ways that he's been supportive of us in that conversation. So I think the process has started, the conversation has started, and now we have to put it into practice, which is hard to do with nobody in the buildings with us, but that's kind of where we are.
So I have a couple of questions that I'd like to, and comment that I'd like to jump in with here. Just to Asima's point, and I hear the challenges being in the schools myself in another district. I appreciate the discretion that has to be placed on cases, and oftentimes that appearance that nothing is being done. We need to work really hard to change what I think I'm hearing from our students, which is that there's an apathy with regard to addressing issues, whether it is reality or their reality. Their perception is reality. And so we need to work really hard in this district to ensure that we have fidelity in a process, that we have documentation of the desired outcomes, and that we are transparent in our reporting of that data. So we don't have to name names, and we don't even have to respond to, public inquiry in the moment, but just making sure that we have fidelity in that process, and that we have a mechanism in place where we can say, these were the numbers of complaints, this is the number that was addressed, and this was the number of meeting the desired outcome that we wished to see. We got 90% of our desired outcome in this process, in the restorative justice process, in the disciplinary process. I think having a mechanism to be able to communicate that data without being so transparent that we're giving specifics and privacy concerns away, I think that would go a long way. So, I'm not sure that that's something that we can do, like you said, at the school committee level, but I think it's certainly something that schools can be doing, collecting that data and reporting that data to us through annual reports. I think would be certainly a way that we could say to our constituents, yes, in fact, we know that this is happening. We know that there's reporting. We know that there is interventions being put in place, and we know that we're meeting with X percentage of success in this process. And if we're not meeting with enough success, then we need to go back and look at the process and see what's going on here. So, the lack of data, I think it needs to be addressed so that we can, we can ensure that what policies and procedures we're putting in place are effective and correct. And then my last final point that I'd like to make is on page 8. And I say this not to be a stickler of words and wordsmithing this to death, because that's not my intention. A lot of awareness is coming out, and the goalposts are moving on wording and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And even just what was acceptable 6 months ago has changed. I think the word tolerance in the third bullet there, teaching tolerance, and I don't know where else it shows up in our communications in this plan. I think that can be a loaded word. I'm not sure that it has the staying power that it once had.
It's also on page 4 in our values. I had the same note.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And awareness is on page 11, which is a similar theme.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Sorry, didn't want to interject, but I had.
No, I'm glad you did, because I didn't know all the pages that it did show up. So I appreciate that. But I think that we, the goalpost continues to change. But I think if we could, before we have to make a final approval, if we can, just do one more look through on some of those words, it would be so super helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Laura. And I think tolerance is a loaded word. So it's like putting up with something, or it's not about tolerance. It's really about relationship and and appreciating and celebrating, you know.
Can you use the word respect instead?
Well, we have that, but I think it's, so we could take, yeah, and I can, with kind of these general notes. Yeah.
Perspective. I mean, there's a lot of things that we could probably do.
Yep. I'm just going to put some notes over to the side. Yeah. Empathy. And what else did you say?
Perspective taking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm lined up wrong. Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Going off of the comment that was made, I think those were excellent, but that's kind of what I was going for is, I know we can't necessarily do much with the school committee in the sense of what we were just the topic we were talking about, but it would be really great if we had some stats at the end of the year. You know, how many types of bullying happened, how many cases, and, you know, what was like, we have like 8 or 10 lists of consequences, how many of each consequences was applied. And I think by data every year, we can see how we are improving. And maybe by that data, we can also show, like what was just mentioned, our constituents that we are addressing this problem and we are following the trend and to making sure that it's being addressed. I mean, I'd like to know how many were reported by students versus how many were reported by teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually a question I had, is what kind of data collection is happening at central office with, I mean, I know it's been such an odd time, but, you know, are the different types of behavior that's reported getting documented, categorized, and the path that they each take afterwards? Is it being documented by school, by town, that kind of thing? How many groups, I guess, are getting counted in the way that the data is getting collected at that central office?
Yeah, I would say our, and Chris, I know you were involved probably in the incident management power school side of things. We, so basically we have to track this data. It's required by the state. So that has to do with, you know, bullying incidents, and we also have to have a discipline management system, which we do through Power School, which some of you might be familiar with. This year, we just began using the incident management system. I believe I'm saying that right, Chris? Right? Yeah. Okay. And it does everything you just said, Linda. So it has to do with who's reporting it, what is the behavior category. Could be bullying, might be conflict, but bullying is one of those. And then what were the action steps taken? You know, so we have to report many of those items to the state every year. That's a required piece too. You know, I'm interested in that as well because you know, we want to look at. I mean, if we have a lot of bullying reports coming in, we talk a lot about school culture on this subcommittee. You know, we look at school culture and how we can create school cultures that basically promote upstanders and bystanders to step up and be able to intervene. But if we have high incidence of bullying, that's an issue. And you know, I hear the need, the call for more data related to that, and I've noted that.
So I actually had just a little bit more. Sorry, Malia.
Oh no, go ahead. You can finish because you were talking.
So what I was curious about is what types of bullying, because I think on the form that for filling out an incident, it just has bullying, cyberbullying, and online, and then the place.
Yeah.
Right. But what I'm curious about is if it's something that talking about moving targets on language and what's acceptable, something like a microaggression, if that's being logged, if it's going to be physical versus non-physical, if it's I guess because bullying can take so many different forms beyond just, you know, bullying or cyber, you know, are those kinds of categories getting logged? Because that's what I was hearing from a lot of the student comments, where there were a lot of things that they considered bullying behavior or some kind of aggressive behavior that was just getting swept as not really counting. So I guess my question is twofold thereof. Are the types of bullying getting logged and documented internally? And well, and then the larger question of how do we make sure things don't get swept under the rug?
Sure. The first one I can answer tonight. So our reports being logged and tracked internally, and the answer is yes. It's done in a few different ways. It's, again, at the building level, they have their own tracking of bullying reports. It comes to central office, and then it's also logged in PowerSchool. So the answer is yes to that. As far as the behavior codes, I can actually put that as some homework for myself for the next time we meet to share what those are, to give you a little more detail on what they are in PowerSchool. I don't know what they are off the top of my head. There's usually 12 to 15 of them, depending. But the nuance that you mentioned, as far as the type of incidents, is in there. For the bullying report, it's a lot more, they're broad categories because these are the forms of bullying. But yeah, I'm happy to do that for the next time we meet. If that would help.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be really great to know.
Okay. I had a couple questions / thoughts. One was about the language that Laura brought up, so I won't repeat that one. I had a question about the issue of consistency between schools, because that's come up a lot in our conversations with students, or at least mine. And in this, I know there was one section, I think on page 5, where it talks about principals choosing and implementing a curriculum. And I wondered if that's a district-wide curriculum that they are implementing in their building level, or if each school is given the option to choose their own. Because that's my question about that. If you could clarify, that would be really helpful. It's
Okay.
on page 5,
Yep.
section
I
B, I believe.
I think I'm there. Yeah. Let me just find exactly where that is. B.
It's under B. I didn't write further than that.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I'm sure it's there. So, so this has to do with basically some flexibility for principals to decide how best to address bullying training of students in school. So, yeah, so that is choose and implement here. I see what you're saying.
Basically,
Yeah.
so basically we're giving each school the ability to choose their own curriculum rather than having a district-wide curriculum.
There's a lot of different roads up that mountain. So that's correct. We do have some
Okay.
flexibility right now, but I want to
All
hear
right.
your thoughts on that.
Well, my thought is that personally, it's just my thought, but I have a basis for this thought in personal experience and knowing a couple people that went, for example, from elementary school to middle school and had issues with the same kid, and then we're told, oh, there's no report of that from elementary school because it wasn't apparently elevated to the level of officially bullying. So there's some inconsistencies. So I have a big concern with that. If we have a district-wide policy, I know that each school has its own culture, but I think in
Right.
terms of the curriculum that we're choosing, or the way, I think there needs to be a basis of a foundation. And then if each
Agreed.
school wants to do their own programming around kindness or how to teach that in their curriculum, there may be more room to be flexible with that. But I think in terms of an overall starting point, I think because we have 13 schools and we have a lot of issues with inconsistencies, I really think that if you have a district-wide policy, you also need to have a district-wide starting point and foundation of this is what we value. This is how we convey that. We do that with math and science and all of our other areas. That stood out to me as a concern.
And I agree with you. So there has to be, I'm hearing you say common language and a common definition for what bullying is.
But
a
also
common
when
response.
you say curriculum, I mean, I think there needs to be a basic building block, and that doesn't need to be defined in this policy per se, because that would probably change from time to time. But some common curriculum that the district and the curriculum committee, I know they have a curriculum group that meets with all the principals, that they agree on and say, this is what we're going to do. Just like you have a common math curriculum and a common science and a common ELA curriculum, and each school kind of tweaks it. But there's a common starting point of these are the things we're going to teach our kids, and this is the basis of it. So that's my concern.
Okay.
I agree. I have that same concern. I think that there should be a universal.
There was a note, I think, on page 7 I made also about training at the building level, and I had the same. It was related. That while I think I think that was training of teachers. And I don't know why we couldn't bring all of our teachers together for an all district professional development, or do it by building, but do the same thing for all of the teachers as a starting point. And maybe I am on the wrong track. It's just my opinion, but
I
I
agree.
heard a lot of inconsistency. So that really stood out to me.
Right.
So just my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm one.
I would echo
Can I
that.
ask a
I would
question?
echo that sentiment for sure.
Oh, I think, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a
Okay.
question. How does Appendix B fit into that curriculum? Because that's a list of
Mm.
a bunch of curricula that can be used. Just how is that meant to be implemented across the building?
Yeah, because I hear so we have kind of the curriculum that we're talking about that would be more ongoing. I think, Malaya, what you're saying, and I agree with you, is that there needs to be across the board kind of a base understanding of what bullying is and what you do when it's as an adult and as a kid when you're experiencing it or witnessing it.
Yeah,
Is that right?
basically. I mean,
But
basically,
not
I don't
only
know
that.
what kind of training was invoked in this, but when I read those two sections on page 5 and page 7 about training and principals choosing curriculums, I just thought really, I thought district-wide something had to be done as a starting point. So that was my comment on that.
Right.
I had one other question and then a procedural question. My other question is admittedly a bit nitpicky, but I hope you can just explain because I'm sure someone will ask me this eventually. On page 9, where it talked about students with disabilities, there is, I had section C noted, but I don't have the exact paragraph. My computer would freeze every day, every like couple of pages. So the last part of that talks about students with disabilities and developing an IEP to develop student skills and proficiencies to avoid and respond to bullying, harassment, or teasing, which is important. What I didn't see in this, and I looked in the whole policy, and it probably is just my lens and how I'm reading it, because that is important to make sure that they have those skills, and that's an important part of IEPs. But what I didn't see when I read that is it seemed like it was putting the whole focus on the student with the disability to avoid being bullied rather than teaching other kids about disabilities and acceptance and not bullying in the first place.
Right. So that's a tricky one. And I hear
I
that
know that
feedback.
comes from other
Yes.
language, but
Yeah. And out of context, it could seem that way. I mean, if you look at the spirit of this whole document is really to have a lot of different ways to address the issue. It's interesting. It's a double-edged sword, and I'll be very careful about how I frame this, but there is research that shows that kids that develop self-advocacy skills and that kind of confidence are less likely to experience bullying long-term. So that is not to say that students who are bullied, kids that are bullied, are not confident or weak, and that is not to say that. It's to say that when kids develop those skills, it's a good thing for them, and it helps them in life, and also helps them to not be victims of bullying. So, that I'm going to make a note here at least to look at this.
I know where it comes from. Obviously, I'm very familiar with the IEP process and the documents around that, but I didn't see any language specifically in here. I think disabilities was mentioned once, but about the flip side of that. So I just wanted to make sure somehow that we weren't giving the wrong impression.
Right.
So there should be, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there should be somewhere in the document, Brendan, a statement around the civil rights, because when there's bullying or negative behavior towards somebody that's directed towards their disability, their sexual orientation, their race, their religion, age is the 5th category, which we don't deal with too often in schools, but then that jumps to a whole different level, and it goes beyond bullying and gets into civil rights issues. So that should be somewhere in the document as well if it's not. Yeah.
That's a good point, because it does.
So like I'd like to see the categories too for data.
Okay. And that wouldn't necessarily, right, because the investigation process, like Chris is saying, for civil rights would be very similar, but it would be outside of the bullying intervention plan. It mentions here about the civil rights coordinator, but any situation involving a protected class would be under Title IX. Yep, so not necessarily in this document.
if I could offer a suggestion on that wording, where it said avoid and respond to for students with special needs.
Sorry about the scrolling. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. Yep, right there. So to develop students' skills and proficiencies to mitigate bullying and harassment or teasing, I think is what it says there. So I think that avoid and respond, right, is again wording that puts more of the onus on the student rather than mitigating what is potentially something that they have no control over.
Yeah, and to change avoid and respond to mitigate bullying, harassment,
Right.
or teasing.
So
Okay.
To identify and mitigate.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Right. So they need to, some students need explicit instructions to be able to identify when bullying and harassment is happening, and then to take steps to mitigate that that issue. And that might be that they need explicit instructions on, you know, talking to an adult, reporting it, saying no, whatever the case might be.
Absolutely. Malaya,
Yeah.
does that seem like a reasonable
That
change?
sounds like a broader description. I like that language better. As I said, I'm just one person, but about the civil rights piece, that's an interesting piece, and it may be helpful if that's included and referenced somewhere to let parents know then where to find information about that process, because I don't think most people know that. I think most parents that I know would report things like that through bullying,
Right.
and not be aware that there's a broader process.
Yeah,
So
well, I'll
that
put a
may
note
be
Is
here.
it Title IX? Is
Yeah.
it Title IX? And Title IX refers to gender, doesn't it? And then other laws refer to race
Right.
and other.
Right. It's all exactly. So title investigation processes. I will put a note in here for that. You know what happens? Actually, if this happened in a school, and it does happen from time to time, basically the bullying report might come in, and then it would prompt a protected class investigation. So, but I hear the that we, you know, it would make sense to reference the differences there
just
somewhere
to
in the
refer.
document. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I think so.
Yeah. And my last question was actually just a procedural question. In the beginning of this document, it referred to putting on the website for public comment for 2 weeks before it's presented to the school committee. Was that done in March?
It was not, but we will have
do
time
that?
to do that. Actually, this is not going to be on Tuesday's meeting,
Okay.
so we can do that.
Okay.
This will be on the November, whatever that date would be, school committee meeting. But thank you for that reminder too.
I was just curious because March was a while ago. I thought maybe it happened in March and I didn't know it. So
No, thank you. Good
Those
catch.
are my
Thank you.
thoughts.
Is that a clarification on that particular question? The school committee will have an opportunity to review this and then we seek public comment, or the other way around?
Other way around. You know, it might be, so we'll probably be meeting between now and then, I imagine. It might just be a quick review of any comments we receive from the public about the document. I'll create a process for doing that, probably a Google form. And if it makes sense, we could bring it back to this subcommittee and just see if it makes us, if we need to change anything as a result. That's just a thought.
I don't think there's a definition of bullying in this policy.
Oh, there should be.
I think it was at the top where it defined.
Right here.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, I missed that. Where is that? All right.
I do have one question. You know, it's similar to the topic that was brought up. You know, when one child goes from one school to another, they're starting off from scratch and taking, you know, and it's not administration's fault that they don't know the history of the students. Is there a district-wide way? So if there's like a student that says, well, this has happened before, instead of administration saying, well, we don't know about it, it didn't happen in our school. Is there a way for that to be tracked in the district so that a child doesn't have to feel like they're starting all over again?
So Brendan, if I can jump in for this. So
Sure.
We're required within the buildings to maintain a copy of any bullying report that's been made to us for a 2-year period. I actually have each of the binders for the 6 years that I've been in Sterling are still in my office, so I can go back further than that if I need to. If a student comes into Choxit and I hear from somebody, well, this was an issue while they were at Houghton or at Thomas Prince, sometimes we get kids in from Princeton. It's a pretty simple phone call, or in my case, I can walk down to Houghton and ask the question. So we have copies of those forms. We also, every year at the end of the year, have conversations with the sending buildings about the kids who are coming in. And for us, that's a general practice. Like, who are the kids who have had issues between each other? And we don't get a ton of details about it because we want to give every kid a fresh start, but we want to be aware of kids who have had problems in the past. So those conversations should be happening. It's a balance between kids get a fresh start versus this is something that's been going on for 3 years and it's continuing. And so when do we kind of up the ante in terms of how we deal with it? But we have that information already, and it shouldn't be that difficult for any principal to get it from a colleague at any point in time.
Good to know.
The other question I have is, what happens if, a student wants to report after school ends? Maybe they didn't have the courage to report something during school, but then they come and report after the school year ended. Does that fall under the school guidelines, or does that mean it's kind of they've lost their chance?
Well, they can come in at any time. So I can't think of an instance when that's happened. I don't know if, Chris, that happens to you often. Administrators work all year, principals. So in theory.
The reason why I'm asking is that's a personal experience, and the answer that I had received was the school year is over. We can't do anything.
Well, so the report can be taken. The tricky part is not having access to the students involved during the summer. That might be, I'm not sure about the situation, but no, reports can be taken at any time. It's the follow-up that gets tricky when we don't have access.
Yeah, there's really no way to investigate that report once it comes in if it's the kids are gone for the summer, is what it comes down to.
I want to mention too, before I forget, so Member Bennett, you'll be glad to know, and others, that so I set up a system for anonymous reporting during remote learning that will actually continue beyond. So actually, I can just show you quickly because I think it's related to this. If you go to our website now, you don't have to go to it. I'll show you. If you go to For Parents, there's a bullying section here. And there's an anonymous bullying reporting form. This is also on every school website now. And it's a basic brief form that does not collect any identifying information. And it just mirrors the bullying reporting form. So this is up and running, and I'm glad to have that in place too, because it's important, especially during remote learning, but also beyond that. So just want to share that with the group here.
Where was that again?
Yeah, I went quickly, sorry. So on our website, right now it's on For Parents, and it's under the bullying section. And we actually today separated out bullying reporting forms, so it's its own thing.
Okay,
and
but that should be told to the students and not just be under For Parents. It's for the students to be able to report as well.
Exactly. We do not have a section for that, but that would be part of what we share with students about reporting forms. Yeah.
Yeah, I would make the suggestion of having that link placed on the school website for the students to be able to access from their school website, because they're going to be more in the habit of going to their school website than the regional school district website.
Yes, so let's I'll just show you where that is too. So those should be all on there. And yeah, For Parents. So yeah, we can work on the category, but for each school it will reroute them back. But I hear that it needs to be accessed for the students. So yeah, so we'll think about where that might go.
It's only for the parents and teachers, or just for the parents?
No, anybody can do it. It's just where it falls on the where it's currently on the website. But I'm hearing that maybe it should go somewhere different.
Could we just put it on the front page of the website as a resource that all of our students should know about? There's a lot of information that gets buried that I think really should be
Sure.
I don't know.
It's a good point. Yeah.
Just my own personal question.
Sure.
I agree.
You don't have to look for it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Could students possibly get an email on it so they know where to look if they need to?
Yeah, we probably want to do it in the context of a bullying talk, because it can, an unintended part of that, and I hear how easy, it's a good idea, Melissa, but what happens is it's just like, oh, this is so easy, and we get we get a lot of reports that kids don't understand the import behind it. So there's ways that we will be getting that word out. I mean, we established this just recently, but that'll be important. Those reports will come directly through my office too, and go out to administrators in the buildings, who would ultimately do the investigation. So anyways, a little sidebar there, but just wanted to say that. Yeah.
Thank you for setting that up. Can I, so I have a couple of comments / questions in here. So I'm wondering if, because I didn't investigate all of the curriculum in there, but I know that teaching nonviolent communication is going to be super important for kids to be able to communicate with each other. And I know that there was something in there that talked about, making friends or keeping friends. There was a note of that or something like that. And that's going to be, I was just wondering if there was a curriculum that included nonviolent communication and how to go through that. And also they have all of the, social emotional, and I read that and looked at that stuff, but I was wondering if there's anything that's teaching them how to be more interoceptive, understanding that anger is not just an emotion, that they can feel it in their body before it happens, so that they can recognize those feelings, not just anger, but recognize those feelings in their body, so that they can regulate themselves, and also prevent themselves from retaliating in ways that might be harmful for either themselves or for others. Let's see, what was the other one? I was wondering how you felt about a police officer being in the school, and how that is not portraying some sort of violence or an aggression towards the kids. I know that has been something that has been mentioned by some of our students, and I'm wondering how that is promoting a safe feeling for some of our students. And then I think that it should be noted that there are absolutely some aggressions that should not be taught to forgive. And there's a lot of emphasis on, there's emphasis on both sides, right? But there's a lot of emphasis on reparations for things, and there are some lines that need to be drawn where the victim needs to be, instead of taught how to forgive, be taught to be strong enough to not let that happen, and be strong enough, or not let that happen, but strong enough to not allow that person to be anywhere near them. Again, there are boundaries that should be placed at times, and have that strength to do so. And I was wondering if that's part of the curriculum as well. And I was wondering if the school is going to become a trauma-informed school, so certified trauma-informed, if that is something that you are looking into, so that the teachers know how to talk with kids who have gone through trauma, because there are behaviors in there that are not going to go along with this beautiful illustration of what you have. Like, there's parts of it that are talking about regulating your emotions. If somebody has gone through traumatic experiences in their own life, they might not be able to regulate their emotions so much in school. And then I was wondering if the curriculum for the kids is going to be like a daily basis thing, a weekly basis, or if it's just like a TED talk during the year, and then you kind of like let it go. So those are my questions, my concerns.
Okay, I'm going to do my best to
Okay,
address
thanks.
all of those. I will. And I'm always honest, and you can always rely on that from me. The curriculum piece, as far as social emotional learning curriculum, that is my job. I've been here just a little over a year. Actually, yesterday was a year in the district, and it is absolutely a goal of mine to have a robust, long-term social emotional learning plan for the district. We do not have one right now. The result of that is that we don't have a consistent curriculum across the district for anti-bullying, for skill building, for social emotional learning. We just don't have it right now. It's a problem that I need to tackle, not just with me, but with, as I always do, bringing in stakeholders. So that's the truth right now. We have a lot of really good things going on in schools as far as social emotional learning. It's just developed over time. Schools have found their ways to do it. But we do need more of a rudder and a guide to do that. And that's what a plan would be. So that was one of the pieces you mentioned about curriculum. Obviously, it's not the answer I want to give you, but it's the true answer. The piece you mentioned about that there are certain things that should just not be let go. So this is a really important part of, I mentioned mediation and restorative practices. That is not an intervention that should be used in every situation. So I'm going to use an extreme example, but if we have sustained bullying over time, which is obviously the worst case scenario, we want to catch these things early. But if there was long-term bullying and the victim is so scared of the aggressor that being in a room with them is not productive, mediation is always voluntary. That's the first thing we do when we train people. Both parties have to be really willing to do that. And power, we talked about in the last meeting here, power comes into play too. If there's a significant power imbalance in a mediation, it doesn't work. There are ways that we can balance it out. Like sometimes if kids who are really scared to go in can bring a trusted adult that's not the mediator, but just a person with them. So I want to just agree with you, Krista, that there are certain situations where mediation should not be used. And the simple one is if the victim is not willing to do it or is not comfortable doing it, it would have an opposite effect. It would not make things better. It would make it worse and re-victimize that person. So, so I just want to mention that it can't be overused, and mediation can't be coerced and should not be coerced either to say, like, oh, you really should do it or else. I mean, it has to just be an invitation that they can accept or not. So I think that gets a little bit of what you're saying, and I really just agree with you.
Yeah.
I really
the
do.
shoulds are very hard. Like you can't should someone into those things because that's shame, So.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the kind of bargaining, I mentioned how, sometimes if a restorative intervention goes well, that consequences could be less. We have to be very careful. It's not a bargaining thing. Like if you sit in the room with your victim, then you'll have less of a suspension. Like that's really manipulative, and it actually creates a situation. So this is when I train administrators and teachers on how to do this stuff. These are the kind of scenarios we bring up. Like it's not a bargaining chip because it just backfires in the room when you're sitting with the kid. And you can kind of tell, like I've done a whole bunch of these restorative circles, and you can tell when there's an elephant in the room. Like you just start to sense it after a while. And the other piece is both sides of the mediation can decide to end it at any time during. So if they think it's a good idea and then it's not going well, then it's like, okay, we're done. And so that's all explained to people. We call it caucusing before mediation, where we say, we talk to each person individually, and it's all that prep work ahead of time. So with that kind of caucusing, Krista, it would weed out any situation. If it's done well, it would weed out a situation that would coerce a student into doing it. And it's really important to do because it can be misused. The nuance in all of this is so easy. And that's why, again, you're learning my style here, but I'm very deliberate and careful about first steps. And I have to say, I've been working a lot with our school counselors in the district and psychologists. We're going to be doing PD on this work this year, restorative practices and mediation, because they're really interested in it. They're doing it already. They just haven't called it that. So anyways, it's a long answer to that. Other pieces of what you asked about. So I think I addressed most of that. The piece we have to, in terms of the student experience of police in the building, it's really important. Anytime we talk about the student's experience of anything, we need to listen to what that is for them. It's a tricky time now. It's such a divisive topic, around supportive police or not. When students are telling us they're having a negative experience like that, we need to listen and understand it better. And I need to understand that better. Just an example, a positive example. So when I was principal, we had a really good community policing program in the town where I worked. And the police really were members of the community and really kind of welcomed in. And there was not that experience, there was not that that kind of pushback. We had, our liaison officer would come in and read books to the kids, and when Officer Josh was there, the kids were just, loving it. So, it's, I really look at the police as our community partners, and that's my worldview. The students that have had those other experiences, it's different. It's a different thing for them. So I just want to, to say what's important there is what students are experiencing, in my thought. And I don't want to be the only one talking on that topic. I'm happy to hear from others.
And then the other piece of, so I just think that we need to keep that in mind. If we are trying to present kids a place where they feel, free and safe, then we need to keep that in mind, because there are many kids that do not feel free and safe when there's a police officer around there. And that can be something that can be worked on from the young ages and up. Maybe it needs to be something that, is talked about, and maybe those situations that are uncomfortable, giving the kids that strength to say, wow, I feel really uncomfortable right now, is really, really important. So, I'm not saying it's an absolute, thing that we need to, get rid of, but we need to know that there are people that are very uncomfortable. And then I was wondering, if the school was considering, or the schools, the district was considering becoming a trauma-informed district.
Yep, happy to talk about that.
Thank you.
So, and thanks for reminding me, I lost that one. When I first arrived, actually before I even started here, I made contact with the UMass Medical Child Trauma Training Center, Dr. Jessica Griffin, who was actually a parent in our district. And those of you who were able to see the webinar we did in September, I believe, it was parenting your child during the age of COVID. She was one of the presenters. So basically, if I were to put, and I'll say this publicly, if I were to put all my eggs in one basket, if the question was ever asked of me, what would you like everybody to have training on? Every single staff member, faculty, and admin in the district, I would say trauma-informed practice. And because it's not just because I think it's flashy and new, it's research-based. It's absolutely the right approach for working with kids and adults when you understand. And it's interesting because through the pandemic, I think trauma has been talked about a lot more in communities where it wasn't talked about before. So you don't hear much about trauma in Wachusett typically. You don't hear, that's not like typically what is brought up. Other districts I've worked in, trauma has been kind of at the forefront. And I'm not going to guess as to why, what the difference is. But so action steps we've already taken with that. I mean, the webinar was just one piece. All the psychologists in the district and the school nurses and counselors have all received just the basic trauma informed practice training. And we're looking at really growing this partnership. I'm in touch with them all the time there, and they're doing work all over the world now. I mean, we're lucky they're in our backyard, and 2 of them are parents, which is great. So, so Krista, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's, I think people understand it better now through the pandemic, because there really is this collective trauma that people have experienced. And we do have a framework, even people that have had minimal trauma or none in their life. So, so we're looking at expanding that through PD days. Actually, last May, it was canceled, but our professional development day, we had 8 sessions lined up for teachers to sign up for trauma-informed practice, and we're looking to do that again. You know, we weren't able to do it the first time, so this would be the initial. But absolutely, and I appreciate you bringing up that perspective. And I'm curious, what you know, what do you think is important for us to realize about that, about trauma-informed, Krista?
Oh gosh, you know, so much. I mean, I've been studying trauma since 2012, and I know how it can really affect a kid, and even just like during like a test, you know, a question or somebody's perfume or something could trigger a response or a feeling in that person, in that kid, and then they won't be able to at all get back into that test or remember anything that they were supposed to in order to complete that test. And what that does is it takes down their ability to actually participate, I don't know, in the curriculum appropriately, or for any test to actually, you know, be able to test how intelligent they actually are if they are having a trauma response to something that is happening at that time. And that can last for hours, it can last for minutes. You know, there is no way. And just having a trauma-informed school and faculty and district will allow for, you know, teachers, staff to maybe recognize the symptoms and see that happening, and a lot of the things from the outside can be seen that somebody is going through something, if people are trained to see that. And then also, you know, like I was saying before, you know, the interoception, like kids being able to recognize in themselves that they are going through that and have the skills to be able to, you know, calm that fear that nobody is trying to kill them at that moment. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and then you know, with you saying, the thing that kind of triggered me at that moment was when you said that you were going to make the curriculum, the trauma curriculum, like teachers could sign up for it. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like it shouldn't be a voluntary thing. It should be a mandatory thing that everybody goes through. But that's my stuff. That's what I think.
I appreciate that, Krista. Like I said, if I were to put, you know, all my eggs in one basket, it would be that. So, you know, I agree with you in a lot of ways. I really do. So it's finding those opportunities, especially in the world of remote learning, when there's so much for them to learn technology-wise. So I'm finding my spots here and taking opportunities when I can to infuse this. So, but thank you for those really thoughtful questions.
I have one other comment, but I have one related to that as well, where you said that it's not really talked about a lot in our district. I think a big piece of that, along with all of the many other issues we've been talking about, is, and this is not entirely the school committee's responsibility, but there is a perception of our district and our communities that they are typical suburban, everyone is 2 parents, white picket fence, you know, no low income students, no food insecurity. Things happen behind closed doors in every community, and not even behind closed doors. But we happen to live in communities where it's more insulated, or at least there's a perception that, you know, whatever reason. And there's some other communities where it's more obvious from the outside, and there's some obvious environmental factors that people can see. But in our communities, I mean, I've heard this in other town communities I'm involved with and other work that I've done, particularly around food, that people said, oh, there's no low-income students in our district. I'm like, really? I know a lot. I know a lot of people struggling to find housing. I know a lot of people who move every few months because they can't afford a house, or their landlord decides to sell their house. I mean, and those are just on the surface. There are a lot more serious things. Our counselors, I'm sure, are aware. But as a district, I don't think people talk about those things a lot because it's easy to pretend they're not there. So I think educating all of our teachers is probably really important, because our kids come from such more diverse backgrounds than people think, and have more things going on than people realize in our communities. And I think it's just the nature of, the kind of towns we live in. I think it's not unique to us, but statistically, there's trauma happening in every one of our towns, and a lot more than people realize.
Right, and I think the shame that can play into it too. In any community, there's a feeling of shame, and embarrassment. But really there is I don't know, there's help for these types of things too, if people are going through. And a lot of our counselors do address those things very diplomatically and privately. So
those are just on the surface examples. There are many other things and types of trauma, and I've worked with them in other ways. But I think the education about, these things happen everywhere is important. And it's not just the school committee's responsibility, but I think that has to go hand in hand with any type of training that you give people, because it's very easy to say that's not our district, because we're not, in the middle of Boston or something where it's very obvious. I hate to say that, but statistically. The other thing I was going to ask you about practically is that it also mentioned a school climate survey every 4 years. Is that a state law that it's every 4 years? Because my reason for asking is that some of our schools, students are only there for 3 years. So if you only survey them every 4 years, even if that's the state requirement, you miss the experience of a whole cohort of students. And I think that's really relevant. And
you'll like this response. We do them much more frequently than that. So much more. So our Panorama Survey that goes out to all students 3 times a year, which we're starting to plan again for this year. Just for those of you who may not know what that is, but it's survey that looks at different skill sets and experiences of students in school. It's going to be really important this year, especially with the feedback we receive from a lot of students. And it's really looking at like a moment in time, what things are going well in school, what things are difficult, teacher-student relationships, student-student relationships, a whole bunch of different things. I could actually present on that sometime here, as I could make a note, just so you could see what we ask kids. But so we do those 3 times a year with students. Last year we only got to 2, I believe, because of the closure. So, but this year we'll be able to do them remotely. So, so that's, it's not every 4 years.
Can we have that as one of the to-dos for the next meetings, upcoming meeting?
I would love to. Yep, for Panorama. Yep.
So Brendan, I'll offer this for you. If we don't want to do it for the next meeting, but we do it after we've provided the survey, I'll bring the Chalksit survey data with us, and we can look at that. So we're looking at real survey data if you'd like. I'm open to that.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it might help to put it in context too. Yeah. So thank you, Chris.
This is the second night in a row that I've been in a subcommittee meeting, and this is the second night in a row that the conversation around school climate surveys has come up for me. Now I want to understand what we're currently doing. This is a survey that is given to students for their perspective on their experience in the schools. Is
correct.
That true?
That's correct.
Do we have a mechanism in our district? Are we currently doing a school climate survey that includes all stakeholders in our community? For example, teachers, administration, paras, faculty and staff, and parents, and so forth. Do we have any mechanism like that?
So no, I don't know offhand. I do not think so, but I will say, so Panorama is a company in Massachusetts, by the way, who develops curriculum, and they also develop these surveys. They have a teacher set of surveys that we do not currently access. There's also a parent survey. I've used them in previous districts. We've used all three actually in previous districts, and it's always interesting what comes up. There's a lot of consistency between all three groups when you look at the data points. That's just an interesting phenomenon that happens. Teachers are very similar to kids, and kids to teachers and parents. So, so not currently, Laura, but that's something that, you know.
Yeah, we actually, each school through their Simco should be sending a very similar survey to all parents at the end of each year, which does talk about and asks for parents' perceptions around school climate. And so those are very similar surveys. They're not exactly the same. Each school has made some adjustments based on questions they may want to ask. That's supposed to happen every year. Honestly, I did not send it to Choxit last year. It generally goes out in April, and we were in the middle of the shutdown, so it did not go out last April. But we should be doing that. I also, there is a survey that all principals have, and it's an option for us to send out to the faculty and staff within each building that we use to help guide our own self-assessment at the end of the year as part of our evaluation, and then creating our goals the following year. That survey data is private. It comes back to me. What the teachers and paras in the building say comes back to me. You know, it's not necessarily shared with Daryl, Bob, or anybody else. You know, I'm open to sharing that data with people if it's asked for, but and I don't know if everybody uses it or not.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that.
Just want to ask on the actual, so the plan, the bullying prevention plan, just want to see if there's any additional feedback on the plan at this time. And I appreciate all the feedback that you've done. Linda Woodland?
Yeah, I just have a question if this is the place for it or not, or if this is better served in handbooks or whatnot. But under the definition for hostile environment, I wondered if it would be worthwhile to go into some of the types of actions that may not be considered hostile, but actually are, because that was one of the themes that really stuck out to me with the student comments, were things that were apparently perceived as not a big deal, but it was a big deal to the student. So, but I don't know if that's an appropriate place for such a thing, or if that's more in training, if that's not really a appropriate part of plan.
Well, you know, so this is a carefully worded definition here of hostile environment, and I think it's pulled out of some legal pieces too. The thing that's positive about this is that it's very, it is broad, and it has to do with the student's experience. So this last line about altering the conditions of the target's education is important, right? So that's very different for every kid. You know, there's different thresholds for what bothers kids and what causes them to become to kind of shut down or become feeling threatened. So that's the piece I like about it, is that it leaves a lot of room for there to be, you know, it's not like, oh, sorry, you don't have these 3 conditions, so this is not hostile to you. It's actually very you know, a little more broad, but I'm not sure if that helps or doesn't help.
It does, and that was exactly why I wasn't sure if it was an appropriate place for it, because I guess what I'm wondering more about is the training aspect of recognizing what is hostile in the first place. And you know, there are so many examples, not just in schools, but across any group of people, where someone says, hey, this is a problem, and the other says, oh, it's not that big a deal. And so it's those kinds of situations that seem to be taken too lightly, that and a lot of things that I wish I had an example to just pop into my mind, but you know, just reading across people's experiences that you don't even realize is offensive, or you know, putting somebody in a hard position, and you need that education to bring them out. So that's where I was looking at. You know, the same thing of like on the forms for filling out, there's, and I understand the reason why specifically physical bullying would be a separate check mark to the process, but I didn't know how that works with if it's like discrimination or something like that. And I guess that's the process of the civil rights.
Right.
Is that the title? Sorry.
Yeah, yes. So one quick response, and others might have thoughts on it too. When we finalize this plan, there'll be a retraining that I'll be putting together that will be consistent, and I'm hearing all the feedback on consistency. So it'll be for everybody. There'll be like one of these mandatory trainings, also for students as well. And with and this is like the basics definition of bullying, what to do when you see or hear it, what to do if you're experiencing it, all of that will be part of it. Once this is finalized, that will be done, and I think that will get at a lot of your concerns about consistency and a lot of the things we've heard. I'm not sure on the other piece though, but I'm not sure if I got to everything you said, Linda.
No, that is it. That's really the main thing because we want to make sure that the plan is implemented to see action, to see progress. Right.
Yes.
That's the goal. Right. So.
Yep. Absolutely.
Can I ask a clarification about the anonymous reporting?
Sure.
Well, you can finish that topic if you have more to say, but it sounded like you were done.
I'm good. I'm good on
okay.
that. Yeah.
Since we have the anonymous reporting form online now, which is great, and I didn't go to the website, so this might be on there, but the policy specifically says that anonymous reports would be investigated, but no consequences would be applied to them in those cases. And I understand that theoretically, but I wanted to make sure if that is the case, that is also made clear when where people can anonymously report.
So it's a little bit different. There's a nuance there that I just want to make sure I make clear. So it's the line about no disciplinary action will be taken against an alleged aggressor solely on the basis of an anonymous report.
Okay.
So meaning
solely is the key word.
Solely is, and there's also the investigation that happens.
Okay.
So that's the buffer. It's a protective measure in there because sometimes, and this happens every once in a while, there'll be a report that's just kind of trying to get at somebody and set them up. So it's the solely piece that is the important.
I appreciate that. I had misread that the first time, so thank you. Never mind.
Worries. No worries. I'm glad you brought it up.
I had a comment / question. I guess my concern is, wait a second. What was my concern? I had it for the last 10 minutes. If somebody has a question, go right ahead, because I need to get my question back in my head.
No worries.
I have something, Malia, you made me think of something that I had commented on or put a mark on in here. You said something about the principals making those decisions, and then you wanted like a broad thing in there. But with the principals making those decisions, now who's to say that the principal isn't going to just say, that's not bullying, it's fine? So that's my question.
That's a potential outcome of that.
If you're the person.
Yeah, it sounds. I'm hearing you say, if I were to read into it a little bit, it's if it were like if that were not appropriate to do, because if there is not actually evidence of bullying, then that would be the finding of the investigation, right? Reports are given to parents of both sides, and there's an appeal process, and you can also file another bullying report if you're not satisfied with the result. I mean, that's always a thing. So the piece as far as the accountability, so I'm hearing you say maybe, Krista, that could be done arbitrarily and in a way that might be problematic. That's the piece of, first of all, the training that will happen. First, I see a lot of proactive measures being taken all the time. But on the flip side, we do need to be careful about these things. So it'd be training principals and assistant principals on what is the appropriate investigation process. That did happen right before I got here, actually. I believe, Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was, I think, like in August of last year. And now there's a very thorough investigation process that needs to happen. If the evidence is pointing towards bullying, then the finding should be bullying. And if the evidence is pointing not towards that, then it should be that there's no bullying. So it's really, it should be less about the judgment piece and more about having evidence to support one or the other. And that takes out this bias piece, which I can hear that might be a concern. If with a thorough investigation, it's very difficult to make a biased decision unless it's just, a pretty stark decision. So as I'm reviewing reports, I'm looking for those types of things as well to say, like, there's a mismatch here. Like, I'm seeing all this evidence of incidents that happen, but why are we not calling this bullying? It seems to be. So that's what
there are multiple eyes on each one of those incident reports, not just the principal deciding to take that and escalate it on their own. There are multiple eyes as well. Okay.
Yep. And that's just it's just good practice, anyways. I mean, I don't want that to be to seem like we have some kind of significant concern about our principals or assistant principals. That's not it.
No.
And I'm saying that for me.
Know.
Yeah, exactly, and it's just good practice because and that's a good way to guard against bias. It really is. And I didn't think you were saying that at all, Krista. I just want to make sure that I say that. So thank you for that.
I remembered my comment. So
right.
This bullying policy, I mean, this is great, but it's all about the reaction after something has been reported. So I guess what I'm asking is, yes, we do PD. And we are doing some, exposure to the kids about what bullying looks like. But in the world of remote, and God knows how long we're going to be remote with the situation we're in, how much of the, not only to students, but the teachers, are we going to have like education around not just cyberbullying? I'm talking about communication over chat. The reason, or a communication over, an online meeting. The reason why I'm asking that, I just experienced it with my own daughter. Teacher, I mean, she was trying to get off of mute so that she could answer a question, but the mute button just wasn't working for her on her Chromebook. And, the teacher, just frustrated, said, well, you shouldn't have been on mute to begin with. And she had to shut her video off because she just literally got teary-eyed because she was so upset that the teacher felt like she wasn't, paying attention or wasn't, taking her class seriously. I had to sit my own daughter down and be like, look, communication through technology can be hard. You need to understand, give people a chance. So I'm sure my child isn't the only one that went through something like this, but because we're in this world of remote and yes, we do address cyberbullying, but I'm just wondering how much of the PD to teachers and students are we doing of how to best communicate through online meetings and through chat, only because so we can avoid, and I think it's a skill that in this generation is going to just move on to their adulthood. So I'm just wondering, does that include, when we say cyberbullying, does it include a more of a preventive approach of the better forms of communication? How can I make sure that someone doesn't misinterpret me and doesn't misinterpret my words?
That's why I brought up nonviolent communication as well.
So I think
and teaching that.
Yeah, I think this plan, if we think of this plan really as it is in response mostly to bullying. That's what a bullying prevention intervention plan is supposed to be. All the things that you mentioned about preventative, and we've actually talked about that in other meetings here, is a goal for me and is a goal for the district. So it's not going to sit in detail in a bullying prevention intervention plan just because of the nature of these plans. This is how to respond to, but this is not where we're ending. We're not ending on this plan and saying that's it. So that's an important thing to realize. This is, like you said, this is responding to, this is not necessarily the skill building. But as a committee, when we met in January, we thought it was important to start to go down that road of the skill building, which is why we included the skills at the end and learning and life competencies. So, but no, I appreciate that. And that's, I think, the spirit of this subcommittee too, is really advising us on a direction to go. I want to also update you all, because it just reminded me, we have not met with that outside partner yet, but we are next week, and we're still pushing forward with looking at who can join us in this work of equity and inclusion. So just want to mention that next, possibly at our next meeting, depending on when it is, I might have more information on that. Now, anything else on the plan? Because I know we probably want to look at least 1 or 2 policies tonight if we have time. Just wanted to see if
I have a question just of the next steps of the plan. So
Sure.
Are the next steps that you'll go look at those notes that we had gone over tonight, and then we'll come back and look at it again? Should we vote to have this to go forward onto public comment? What is it not ready for that? I guess, what are we?
So my recommendation, and I'm open to feedback on this, would be I really agree with the recommendations that you all made for wording. I have notes in here. I'll change those, and there'll be an updated document at that point. Then I think it'll be ready to go for public comment on, and I'll come up with a process for that for the next few weeks once we put it up. Most likely to be a Google form that people can make comments on, revisions or whatever they think it might need to be. And then I think it'll be, after that feedback, if there's not anything major that we need to change, we should be ready to, if the subcommittee wishes to recommend this, we should be ready for November, for our November meeting, which I don't have the date of offhand. Does anyone have that? November 9th. Yeah, November 9th. I think that's doable. It's October 8th now.
As a communication mechanism to make sure that we reach as wide a blanket, a netting of people, I'm wondering if it's possible to post the plan and the feedback mechanism in the school, at the school level, through principal communications. I'll speak for myself. That's my primary go-to for information as a parent. It's rarely that I would naturally go to the district website or necessarily key in on something from the upper administration. So if the principals could, direct a link and to both the plan and the form through their communications, and provide enough time for parents to then respond to your form, that would be casting the widest net, I think, possible.
Yeah, great idea, Laura. I agree with you. So we can definitely do that. And I think we'll put it, it'll be probably in a district-wide message on the school sites, just everywhere we can. And yeah, thank you. We want to get as much feedback as possible too. And honestly, through I was just going to say, through that feedback, we also learn about people's experiences too. So I think that's helpful, always helpful.
I have a quick question about the form that you showed us for bullying prevention.
Sure.
Is that form going to include for kids to report racial discrimination on it as well? Or is that going to be or is that something separate?
So a lot of times I've seen in districts that we do get those kind of reports on a bullying report. It doesn't typically say race on the form. It's I'm just worried about kids not, because of all the emails we got and information from kids. I'm just worried that they'll see bullying and not know they can report any incidents of racial discrimination on it. So I don't know how that can be clearer. So I think the way it can be clearer is through this, the training that I mentioned too, that needs to come out of this, that needs to be in there. And actually that's, once it's kind of a multi-phase thing. So once this gets approved, I'll be developing those materials, and I will be interested in this committee's feedback on those materials too. So, you thought you were done with this stuff, but we'll have another layer to dig into. But because yeah, it'll be about. I actually have a lot of things from previous districts that we can adapt for different levels. So, but I agree with you, Melissa. That needs to be clear. Like, what does it look like? And yeah, absolutely.
Just Brendan, a title.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is there a reason why we can't call that form the bullying,
yeah.
harassment, racial discrimination
Thank
reporting
you.
form?
Yes, exactly. I was reading my
I'll
mind.
check on that. I'll check. I don't see a reason why not, but I will. I'll make a note in our minutes and
Good suggestion.
find out.
Okay,
I mean,
great.
any of those things that somebody would report would lead us to an investigation, and the investigations might look a little bit different, but that's where any of those forms would lead us. So
Would it be okay if we just said discrimination so it encompasses all types?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Good.
Yeah. So I have a note here to. I just need to look into, any potential legal reasons that we wouldn't do that. But logically, I'm with you.
Okay, thank you guys.
With the form, it reminded me, and it made me scroll down a little bit there. So it says, what types of incidents was this? And I think we touched on it a little bit, but it says bullying, cyberbullying, and then other, and then it gives text/cell phone. Maybe if there could be like an ellipsis, because there's like other than texting and cell phone, they might think that it's kind of like limiting. And then also maybe if there's going to be an example after other, maybe just like a little like example after cyberbullying and then an ellipsis, and then like the same with bullying, just so that they know that there are other things, and there that encompasses quite a bit. Just that tiny little change in there might allow kids to actually know where to put this and how to explain themselves a little bit better.
I agree. Absolutely. That form is the trickiest one to edit, so I will. that'll probably take me longer than anything. But yeah, but it's an important change to make. So I'm happy to do that.
While we're on the topic of forms, I had one suggestion for the student form. I think that's the last one. Sorry, I'm just scrolling back down. The student reporting form for bullying and retaliation. It says to submit it to a school administrator. Maybe not for the older kids, but for younger kids. I wondered I'm just thinking if my son were to fill this out, would he know who the building, to an administrator is necessarily? I mean, maybe, but if that can be spelled out just a little bit more for the younger kids, I thought that might make it move a bit better.
Yep. And yeah, who is that person, right? Because especially for really young kids, everybody's a blur. When I was principal, the kindergartners. This is just a funny story. They used to call me Mr. Donut, and the reason is because I wore a donut tie. They didn't even know my name. So, so absolutely, it's really important that kids know. So this is part of the training too. So I'm going to make a note here about the list of administrator names, and even better, maybe pictures.
So
really,
our training with the kids tells them that they can report it to any adult in the building, and then our training with the adult is if they get a report from any kid, it should come to the building administrator. So I think if a student's filling out a form, it can go to any adult.
Exactly. Yes, I agree.
Oh, so or administrator or trusted adult in the school or something like that.
Even better.
That's great.
That is much better. Yep, and it should always end up with an administrator, but that would be training the teachers and staff on making sure that they know to do that. So absolutely. Really good feedback, everyone. Thank you. Okay. Go ahead.
I have one thing. So on page 11, under the non-academic bullying prevention efforts, on bullet 5, it says schools will encourage student involvement in school events and extracurriculars to reduce isolation and likelihood of becoming a target. That just sounds really like victim blaming to me, and like that we're blaming kids, like, oh, if you don't go to the homecoming dance, you're not like, you deserve to be bullied. And I was like, I get what the like premise behind it is, but like, could we reword it so it's not just like, if you don't go to like the school event or you don't like go to those events, you like will become the target of bullying? Because I feel like that just like from a student's perspective seems like, I don't know, seems like I'm being blamed.
Good point.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Is this one we want to either take out or reword?
yeah, I don't know how you would reword it, but it just feels like really like it's victim blaming the student that doesn't go to certain events or participate as much.
So I remember
and then
oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
No, you can go.
It was just about, I remember talking about this in the task force and about finding, finding your tribe, that kind of idea, more so than, you better go to the dance or something. So if the wording could reflect that idea, I think that's a really good observation. Okay.
Maybe it's finding an outlet instead.
So,
Got some
yeah.
ideas here. Just to put some rough notes. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Could we word it so that it puts more onus on the school to create opportunities for students to engage in activities that are meaningful to them? We're talking about in other committees, we're talking about retention and student retention. We want to make this place, we want to make district a place that students want to come, students want to stay. So it's really about this. It's about what the school is offering, not about what the student is able to be encouraged to do. Right.
So you can read that. Oh, go ahead, Nicole. I'm sorry. There's a delay. I'm sorry about that.
No, I just mentioned even with the focus on changing the words about encouraging people to find their tribe and all that, which I do agree with and I totally get. But I'm still extremely uncomfortable with the idea of putting that focus that's how you avoid becoming a target of bullying. Very introverted kids who, for whatever reason, they don't want to go participate in. I just think that even changing the wording to focus on them getting involved in things that are important to them and meaningful to them, that's all great. But I think attaching it to that reduce the likelihood of becoming a target for bullying is just, I just think it sends a really uncomfortable message that it should be the flip, that we will teach kids that just because someone's isolated doesn't mean you get to bully them.
Right.
Making sense?
I agree. I agree with what everyone's saying. What about this? Can you see this indented bullet, which is kind of a revised version based on your feedback? Schools will create opportunities for students to engage in a variety of activities that are meaningful to them and that help them to feel positively connected to the school community. Does that still get at it in a little bit better wording? Mostly done by Laura.
I think that sounds much better. It does not put the onus on, like Catherine was saying, the target. So I think that sounds much better.
Yeah.
I like the idea that the positively connected to the school community is not, it's not calling out either side of a bullying interaction. It's something that would be important for avoiding bullying behavior to begin with, or not being the target, or to use the phrase we're avoiding.
Absolutely.
Does it have to be connected to the school community? Because shouldn't we be encouraging them to feel connected to a community? And so if they have, I don't know, found like a D&D club at like, I don't know, a local church, that's still going and having like a community that might not be part of the school and still should be encouraged.
Absolutely. So I added and or the local community to
So I hear you on that. I just think that perhaps that's beyond our control, right? When we talk about community involvement, whether it be the Scouts or whether it be, a D&D, as you say, that it's just, those are things that are really beyond our control, that we can only do what's useful and able to be done within the school environment. So that's my only 2 cents on that one.
Yeah, there would be no way to like make sure that it's happening, but for like health, the whole like promoting it and saying that it's a great idea. They might not be able to give those opportunities, but to encourage kids to find that, the encouragement. So maybe not creating opportunity, but encouraging to get involved in a community and find their tribe, like Linda was saying.
And I would say that we make those efforts already to connect kids who we see who are isolated or not connecting to different things that we have going on in our school. We're trying to connect them to things in the community. And in many cases, it's easier to connect them to something that's in the community than it is to try and create something for them within the building, right? We have kids who are interested in horses, but I can't have an equestrian club at Joxet, right? So will we reach out to one of the farms in Sterling and connect them?
Yeah, good point.
Absolutely. So I think we're deciding to definitely take out this, and thank you for Catherine catching this, taking out this bullet, and we're going to replace it with something that we haven't quite finished yet. So I'm going to take this out. Yeah, and to Chris's point too, and also Krista, adding the local community, I think, what doesn't hurt, because there are times school counselors do a lot of that too. I know, connecting with community support. So and/or the local community. I appreciate that. Okay.
I have one more
Anything else?
thing on the student report form.
Sure.
Can we make a page that describes certain incidents in which students should fill out the form? I think a lot of other members have gone at this, but like a student should fill out this form when feeling and like list certain like emotions or certain instances which would like show what a student and like a situation that a student should fill out the form so that they know like more, or like even just like the statement of what bullying is. Like you should fill out this form if you have been feeling like this, or like as a student, I like you could even make it like a certify, like I certify that I like, and like put the bullying definition, because I feel like we said a lot of different things that the form could be used for besides just what I think of as straight bullying. So could we put like a list of instances in which we should fill out the form?
I think that's a great idea. Any thoughts on Catherine's suggestion there? I made a note.
Yeah.
And for the paper form, and then also the online form, the online doc is the one that should definitely, because they're going to probably see that first before they fill out a paper, especially now.
True. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would just say that the form, we want to make sure, and I'm sure if it's a Google form that this is possible, but some of our students would probably go to a school website on their phone, so we need to make sure that it's accessible and able to be completed on their phone. That's probably going to be the first thing that they do if they're feeling threatened or like something is. They'll go to their phone and they'll fill out that form.
And Google's pretty good with that, Laura. Google does translate pretty well to most phones, but good point, absolutely.
So my thought on a page like that is just to make sure it's worded in such a way that it's not overly prescriptive, so someone doesn't think it must be one of these examples to use this form. And I mean, that just depends on how things are worded. But I know it's a fine line, but I'd hate for someone to think, oh, none of these happened to me, so I don't need to use this. Because every situation is different and unique. So I think it's a good idea to provide some context or example, but I think we need to be careful not to provide too many, because you're never going to capture everything and you want to make sure people are free to use it.
Right. And some kids have trouble generalizing, especially the really concrete thinkers. So they could say, well, it wasn't on the slide.
Of those, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think I was one of those. So anyways, yeah, really good.
Really broad. You'd want it to be really, really broad, right? And from my perspective, I'd much rather get a form for things that don't rise to the level of being called bullying, and we can address whether it's just two kids not getting along in a moment or somebody saying something, not understanding that it's offensive. I'd rather get that information sooner and be able to address it right away. So, the more of these forms that we get, in my opinion, is the better, because we can hopefully stop some of this stuff before it grows to that level. So I would agree with Malaya. You just want to be careful that you're not restricting people or holding people back from filling it out.
Right. when I speak with administrators about if they're on the fence about investigating or not, sometimes it doesn't come in on a form. It's just a verbal report of something like a repeated action. I always say investigate it as bullying. I mean, it's important to do it that way. I mean, there are times where it's not necessary to go down this road and a lesser intervention can happen. But if it's even close, it needs to be investigated because we have more to lose by not investigating than we do to gain. So. All right, so I want to kind of start to wrap this part up unless anyone has anything else pressing. I really appreciate the level of detail that you're helping us polish of what we already have here. But thank you all very much for that. I know it's kind of exhausting work, I think, to be looking at word by word, but I really appreciate it.
Well, with the amount of conversation we had with this, I'd like to take the next item on our agenda a little out of order, and before we end tonight, at least go over the policy of the appreciation of diversity, since it's short and sweet and we can talk about it. I want to give all the policies its due diligence and conversation. So if you have no objection to the out of order, if we could just take the appreciation of diversity policy next and review that.
Yeah, and I'm going to pull it up on the screen here too. I know I see some tired faces, so this is a short one you'll be glad to see.
Right, we'll do the other ones in our next meeting. I just want to make sure that we're giving enough time to each of these policies and make sure we have enough time to review them and give our feedback.
Absolutely. Can everyone see that? Okay.
Looks good to me.
So do we need to make a motion to enter into discussion about this? So I would like to move that we discuss policy P6436, appreciation of diversity.
Second.
Great, let's go down the list. Member Amos,
Yes.
Member Christian-Baum,
Yes.
Member Ayala,
Ayala, yes.
Member Woodland,
Woodland, yes.
Member Bennett,
Bennett, yes.
Member Gustafson,
Gustafson, yes.
Member Longbelio,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
So I don't see any glaring revisions from my perspective that need to be made. I think it's an affirming statement, and I think we should continue to adhere to this policy. That's my 2 cents.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that I agree that there's nothing glaring. I don't know if others feel the late 90s feel of it. I
Yeah.
can't quite put my finger on.
Well,
Yeah.
but that was my question is, I honestly, like, I'm reading this and I'm thinking, this was last reviewed in 07. And I'm just wondering, it's very broad, but what were we missing that, I mean, it's a great message, right? Encourages an appreciation of diversity. But there's obviously, what was missing in this policy that we didn't implement or didn't do that we have gotten ourselves with, students feeling this way? And it has something to, does it have something to do with the fact that this was last reviewed in 07?
I
At the same time, I don't know what to change about it.
Well, so that's it. I don't know what to change
Yeah.
about it, but it's that same issue of that why we wanted to take out the word tolerance.
think
Right? It's that
appreciation isn't
same
too weak.
feeling. Yeah.
Like I don't know.
It's-
That's
it's
my own
toothless.
opinion, but it goes along with the tolerance question. The appreciation is important, but then you have to encourage, I don't know. In some discussions I've had in other parts of my life, they've used acceptance instead of appreciation, or inclusion, or something in that direction instead of just appreciating. And I don't really know, as I said, I think it's fine the way it is, but that's the thing that I kind of questioned.
It kind of has like that feel of like individual differences of students are to be appreciated. Like that feel, do you know? I don't know, maybe that's just what I'm reading from it, but that's like, it's like, you better appreciate it. So there's got to be a nicer way to, to kind of say that in there. Also, and I think the problem and the reason that this isn't, that the feel in the community is not that this has been there, it's probably because they haven't seen it. So the biggest problem is that, like, you know, this isn't plastered on the wall.
That's a good
My other
point.
comment for this is, it's just, I mean, I like it. It's a good message, but it's almost so general, which it should be, but at the same time, it just feels like a very good politically correct thing to say. I'm just wondering, what is the goal of this policy? It's a great goal. It's a great moral value and core value. Is that what we're getting across from this? Like, what's exactly the goal of this policy?
Yeah.
I mean, this is why the way I look at this, it's one policy of many, and it's more of a statement of purpose, a statement of vision in some ways. So I think, you know, it's hard to measure that, and this is not meant to be measured. This is more of a, here's what we hope for as a district in this regard. But I wonder, you know, given that we're a school, the series of number of schools, if we had the word teach in here somewhere, that's an action, you know, that we do in schools. So I don't know if that would help us or not.
Yeah, I agree with you. So like it says like, this is what we want, this is what it should be. And then like maybe like expand on that with like a by such and such, or yeah, by including such and such in this and that. I'm not sure what those would be, but it should have like an action item to it instead of just a feel.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what's missing.
That does make sense.
Maybe,
Well,
but
I would like.
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Go. You go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say something in the terms of the Wachusett district will work on educating students in, you know, the district on diversity, I guess. Maybe adding something in that effect.
Yeah, maybe in this first part, Melissa.
I'm thinking so, yeah.
Maybe educating students on the value of diversity.
That sounds good, Linda.
I think another thing that it's missing too is diversity of what? I mean, there's so many ways to take diversity, and in some cases the broadness is helpful, but I think in this case it just kind of dilutes it into a feel-good message versus action.
Well, the thing is, though, if you list out specific things that they're supposed to, that comprise diversity, I think you inevitably leave something out. And so I sort of like the vagueness of it, the broadness of it.
Right. No, I absolutely hear what you're saying on that, because right, that is a big problem. You're always going to leave someone out once you start listing like that. But you know, something like diversity of perspectives, diversity of cultures, diversity of, I feel like there could be something that doesn't involve a list that can give it a little bit more oomph.
So I'd like to make some suggestions here. So in the first sentence, the Wachusett Regional School District shall provide a learning environment that promotes, teaches, and encourages an appreciation and respect. I'd like to put in, suggested we put in respect of diversity, and then maybe incorporate an understanding of others' worldviews.
Yes, see, I still think we should not get too specific. I just think it opens a Pandora's box. And yeah, because, you know, that's my view.
I was thinking like life experiences, like a diversity of lived life experiences and a respect of the diversity of experiences that people bring to the table. I don't know, as opposed to like worldview.
Could we say something like the diversity of experience? Oh shoot, I had it in my head. It'll come back to me. Sorry. It was like people and experiences or something like that. That's not too specific. But
experiences and identities. I don't know.
Something like that. Yeah, that's the direction I was heading. I had an exact sentence, but I lost it. So that is the general direction. So it was still very broad, but it included both environmental and experience or identity. Yeah.
Can we include like understanding global diversity? So the global just means anything, like some word that really encompasses all sorts of diversity. Because when we say personal experiences or something like that, it almost makes me feel like, well, some people believe that our community doesn't have as much diversity, so only the people that are in it that will bring that diversity are the only ones that are going to be. I would like to see it, even if we don't have representation, still be able to teach and respect all of them.
Could we just say perspectives and identity or something like that? Does that include enough?
I like that.
Perspective and identity can inform a lot of things.
Yeah,
that's true. That's
diverse.
I like that.
Perspectives and identity.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the
I think that's about as good as we're gonna.
One of the words that I'm reading a lot as I read about this topic is individualism, and the concern of losing people's individual identities by lumping things together in larger terms.
Yeah.
Right. And so I wonder if there's a way to include that or replace some of the words with that, the individualism.
So like respect of students' diversity and individualism.
Well, the second
Diversity and
paragraph.
individuality.
The second paragraph starts with individual differences of students.
That's true.
Oh, that's true.
Does that cover that?
I wonder if there's a way that we could put in like the free exchange, that we promote the free exchange of ideas.
I like that too.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in that first sentence. So
would that be under perspectives?
Yes.
Oh yeah, that would be included in perspectives. Yeah.
Where do we have perspectives in there?
That was in my suggestion, that we say an
Yeah.
appreciation of diverse perspectives and identities.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I have another suggestion. It was something that came up in Education Subcommittee last year. A lot of the old policies said in the beginning, it says the Wachusett Regional School Committee in the beginning. And a lot of the time we were taking out committee and replacing it. I think we said district, if I remember correctly. The Wachusett Regional School District versus committee shall provide. I don't know if others agree.
Yeah.
No, I like that. I think it makes us unified.
Another thing that came up when I was talking to students was the word shall, because a lot of students, when I showed this to them, said that this sounded fake and said that, you know, they've had this policy since whenever, but they haven't felt that way. And so they thought changing the word shall to strive to, because like that shows that we're working towards a better environment instead of saying that we already have it and that we're going to have it, as opposed to we're working to get there and we're always continuously making improvements.
Thank you for that. I think you just hit the nail on the head of why I was finding it very empty or something missing when I first reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also in the last sentence with the all students can expect, kind of like, it's very kind of in that tone.
You could say should expect.
So I have a flip side to that, in that, particularly with the last sentence. I think our policies are supposed to convey, at least this is my opinion, where we want to be and what our students can expect of us. And I could see it either way. I completely can understand that perspective, but I also think by saying our students can expect this, we're committing ourselves to providing it. Whereas anything short of that allows a lot of wiggle room and says, well, that's something we hope to do, but we're not really committed to doing, if that makes sense.
That's fair.
That's just my perspective, though, and I can see both
That's
sides.
fair.
So I think we should be committing to it and have it as a point of reference that this is what we commit to doing as a district. But again, I
like the idea of striving to, for me, is it's thinking like we always have to do better. That was said before too, and I like that because this isn't like, oh, we've done that. Like now we're we appreciate diversity and we're all set with that. The striving to is nice because it's that continual improvement idea. So I appreciate that suggestion, and I know there's different ways to look at it.
I am having a hard time with the differences part of individual differences, because it's kind of based, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but to me it has kind of an othering effect where you've got a baseline and then there are people different from it.
So then individuality instead of individual differences.
Right. And that's really good. And the other part that I think we've talked about inclusion as being an idea that could be in here as opposed to just appreciation. And then also I wondered if the idea that we're looking for is making sure that the students in our district understand the world beyond Wachusett, since we are not representative of the wider world by demographics. We have to really put it in front of our students. We can't expect them to just pick it up along the way because the natural experiences aren't going to be there for enough of our students.
Right.
So I don't know if there's a way to look at the uses of appreciation and kind of bend it more towards inclusion. And maybe with the idea of the respect of diverse perspectives and identities, if there's a way to put that idea of beyond what we encounter here.
How about at Wachusett and in the world and in the broader world, or something like that, and in the community, or not the community? That's what community is not quite right, because it's anyway.
So that makes me think a question again, what the purpose of this is, because it's a policy about people's services, which not curriculum. So I just want to clarify what the purpose is, because that sounds like it's going in a global, like, curricular direction versus how we are treating students in the environment we're creating for them to learn in, which I think are two different things.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Then
really good.
Would
Would
that be added to the expanding on this, because this is an idea, and then there should be like an action to it, like by doing this, or so would that include the global part of that? What do you think?
Do we have other policies for curriculum specifically around diverse curriculum? No, just for, thank you. Thank you, Chris. I don't have the whole list in front of me. So I think it's equally important. I just wanted to clarify what our purpose, of this was. So
yeah.
I think your point was well taken. Malia, and I think that perhaps we need to ask Ed Sub to look into perhaps drafting a policy around diversity
Curriculum.
in education that
In
fits
curriculum, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe
Was that part of Brendan's work? Remember, Brendan, we were going to have some sort of report on what kind of curriculum when it comes to diversity, various types of diversity throughout our age groups in different schools. I believe we had talked about getting some sort of report about that.
We did. That's related but different. So that's more of a curriculum audit. This would have to do with where do we want to be? Because right now we don't have kind of a North Star to aim to in that. We don't have a policy. So
We don't have a policy on diversity and global perspectives in our curriculum. Right.
Not that I know, not off the top of my head, Chris seemed to, I don't think we do. I don't think we do.
Which
so
is
that would be
different
something
than-
with Ed Sub. Yeah.
Which is different than this one, which is, I think, as I read it, focusing on learning environment and individual perspective, like where individuals can feel safe in, learning environment.
Malia, I really liked what you just said. Like, what was it? Diversity and global perspective.
I said appreciation of diverse perspectives and identities, and then someone else added something about global.
Can we add in? I thought you were adding in global perspectives and something like that. I think we can add that into what you just said.
Yeah, someone added it. I forget where though. So go interject.
I think Linda Long, that might have been you.
I said something about at Wachusett and the broader world or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Or at Wachusett and globally, something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that would be good, I think.
Yeah.
Just putting that in as a rough note.
Actually, that makes sense also because we'd hope that, just as people can, I just go back to what we were talking about bullying, people can do that outside of the classroom. And I mean, hopefully they would carry this perspective with them outside of the classroom. So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this really gets at mindset. I think this is kind of like the district's mindset. That's what this policy seems to be getting at. I have it highlighted in green, some other areas we talked about changing. Not sure where we left off with that.
So what if we were to start with students, capital S, are to be appreciated and respected within district policies and regulations, and then leave the next sentence as is? Or I guess appreciated is the word that is highlighted as well. To be.
So that sentence to me was pointing at the, I guess the variety of student experiences won't have an impact on how district policies and regulations are made, right? That they're all equal under the policies, right? That was kind of the goal of that sentence.
Yeah.
So I feel like students are to be appreciated and respected within district policies and regulations, regardless of something.
Yeah, it kind of takes away
like
the
the
spirit
idea.
of it a little.
I
guess.
agree. Yeah, regardless, regardless, I think does detract from it. I liked I liked someone said something about the individuality of students. I liked that. The individuality of students is to be appreciated and respected within district policies and regulations. Yeah, I liked that a lot. And
Could
See what
you say, yeah, go ahead. I have a different wording, but go ahead with that one.
Oh, well, I'm just putting it up there as a rough thing, but we can.
I was going to suggest flipping the sentence and saying district policies and regulations should respect students' individualities or respect the individualities of those in the district community or something like that.
well, I think you need the within district policies and regulations because somebody could come in with, I don't know, 10 swastikas on their, backpack.
So the within is important. Yeah. That's fine.
So I don't know. There could be people could use that as an excuse to act out in various ways.
Well, I was going to
I
suggest
think.
starting with district policies and regulations should respect student, whatever. It's fine, actually.
Yeah.
It's a grammar thing. It's fine. Just
Okay.
thinking aloud.
Can
That's
I
what
make
happens
one
when 7
suggestion?
people think aloud.
One other suggestion to that sentence is you include the word practices. So it's districts, regulations, practices, and policies, because there's a difference between our practices and our policies.
Yes.
Good point.
Policies.
So I think I'm misreading this sentence, and perhaps maybe that's the conversation that's happening is making me rethink how I'm viewing this sentence. My understanding is from this sentence that basically students are the district policies, practices, and regulations respect students individually. In other words, how am I saying this? I'm getting tired. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That they don't discriminate against them.
Policies and the practices and the regulations that are equally administered to all students. That's how I read that. But what I think that I'm hearing is that no, that our policies, practices, and regulations have to take the individual into account. I'm not explaining it very well. I'm hearing two different versions of this sentence.
The way I read that within district policies and regulations is that we respect individual differences, but that there are some, for lack of a better term, boundaries to that. That's honestly the way I read it.
Yeah, that's what I heard you say, and that's not what I had originally interpreted in the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
I like your interpretation. That's just not what I was envisioning with that.
Yeah, that's how. I think that's what's intended there, because somebody could, as I said, someone could use that as a reason or a justification for acting out and saying, "Oh, well, you're supposed to respect my individual differences, so therefore I can behave in this horrible way."
Yeah.
So, human nature being what it is, and teenagers especially, I'm thinking of being what they are sometimes. So that's my thought.
Where do we leave off with appreciated? Is that in or out?
Yeah, someone had a stronger word. What was it? Who said it?
I've
I
heard
think I said
inclusion.
valued, but I don't know.
Valued. I like that.
So I just want to make sure I have a clear reading on this too. So this policy is not about discrimination, but this is about valuing
Right.
or appreciating.
We have another one on discrimination. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, this is a positive statement
Right.
rather than a,
Can we add a statement about what the long-term goal is? Like the goal of this district, is to create a generation or a group of students that respects and values or something, because I feel like this talks a lot more about short-term and within school districts, but I think we really want it to those students to take it outside of the school district and through into their real lives.
There you go. That would be the
Love
action item. So this, and then to do this. To this goal. Yes.
That could even be some concluding statement down here at the end.
So that our students become a more productive and respected member of society, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
I like that too.
Could you say it again before we lose it?
Something about the students becoming a productive and respected, not only respected, but giving respect to other members of society. Becoming something. I said something.
You did say something.
That's what you said.
Productive
That's what you
and
said. You said
respectful.
becoming a more productive member of society.
Yes.
Or productive and respected.
And respectful.
How about
respectful
productive and inclusive? No.
How many other words? Can we put in there?
I'm just throwing words out there. I'm just trying to, I think the notion of, I think of inclusion, well, I think of something more than appreciate. I think of like inclusion, or I don't know. That's not really the right word either, because that's become a buzzword. But
Yeah, I don't know about hope either. It would be
Yeah.
like
What do
to
you think?
the goal,
do the
it is
thing.
the goal of, or in order to.
There we go. In order to.
In order to have students become productive members of society. And we can add in certain adjectives.
Write it down. Write it down.
In order
Before I
to.
forget.
Where does in order to go?
In
Sorry.
order to have students become productive members of society. That's what she said. I write fast.
In order for students to
Become productive members of society.
Yes. So
I'm just worried about defining productive members of society within the
that's
confines
true.
of this policy.
That's true. That's true.
Well, I think we are an educational system, so productive, I think, should be there, but we can add in other adjectives, right? About the other diverse parts of it.
So,
what about the word empathic as embedded in this?
I like that.
Yeah.
Empathic.
Could we use something that's a little less, I don't know, formal, like caring or compassionate,
Sure. Yeah.
something like that?
Caring. And combat, maybe both. I don't know.
Caring and compassionate, or compassionate?
I
Maybe
wanted to use my
compassionate would be
social
better.
work word. I want to use my fun SEL word. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think it's better though. Caring, compassionate.
So, and then does this policy read better if that's the first statement as opposed to the last?
Or
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
yes,
because then
that's a good
our goal.
introduction.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I
it
think-
belongs in the first paragraph.
I liked someone said goal instead of order, though. The goal of Wachusett Regional District, maybe, instead of order. That
Yeah.
just sounds so
I feel
abrupt.
like it's what was said before, that in the sense of that is what we're trying to achieve rather than.
Yeah, that sounded much better. And I like how Chris said to put it in the first sentence. Yeah.
A goal. Is it a goal?
Yeah.
Yeah, a goal. There's lots of goals.
Become productive.
That's consistent with our values, right? That are in the other policies.
I think so.
That was my next question, Malia. Does this line up with the goals that are stated, like in the bullying, in our mission, in all of our strategic plan that's expiring?
Yeah, that's all
Can
another
I offer
process.
one more suggestion? And we throw it away if it doesn't matter. Instead of just caring and compassionate, because I think those two words are sometimes overused, can we do become productive, emotional, social and emotional intellectual members of society? Something that, because I think caring and compassionate is good. It's just very vague.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to use the
It
word
is vague,
intellectual, though. I do, because we have a lot of students that, that may not. I don't know. It's just a word that has some definition to it. It's to some people.
Or like,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to say is so that they are socially and emotionally
aware.
Yes.
Socially and emotionally aware.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just a little concerned about moving away from the titled purpose of this policy of
True.
diversity.
True.
And I mean, I think that globally part of the end of now the second paragraph, if that's, we're talking about awareness, which has its own problems within a policy too, right? Because we go into that same circle of appreciation feels weak, awareness feels weak, in terms of a statement. But I think that is a little bit more specific somehow.
I like globally in there, maybe to like hit it home, because appreciation of diversity, right? So a goal of the Wachusett regional school district is for students to become globally caring and compassionate members of society, something to that extent.
Or maybe globally minded.
There we go.
Yeah. But is that
No, I worry a little
buzzwordy?
bit.
Can I?
As I think
I'm
about the
going to
word-
be the devil's advocate and go back to what I
Mhm.
said earlier about we're straying into curriculum-ish goals with what we're teaching
Yeah.
them versus the environment we want them to learn in, which I think is what this started out as.
Mhm.
They're two different. I mean, we want to do all of it, but I think the purpose of this policy was about environment and making sure our policies are consistent with that, and not what we're teaching them.
Mhm.
I could be wrong. You can all tell me I'm wrong, but that was my original
Yeah.
reading of it.
I
And
agree.
mean,
I think
Yeah.
this is meant to be how the district responds to students' individuality. I think that we need to, though I love that first sentence, I think we need to dial that back
yeah.
and keep it focused on what our organization is providing for our students. We are ensuring that they have
A learning environment.
respectful learning environment, and that is, respectful of their personal identities and experiences. So I would suggest that we pull back that first sentence, and then on
Can
the
we
second,
save it for our next policy?
Yeah.
I'm
I'll
sure there's a
put
policy
it
it
to the
applies
side.
to.
You know
I'm
what?
gonna-
It's folks. I'm getting to the point where I'm not really coherent anymore. So I sort of need to step off, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So
No problem. Linda.
Anyway.
I think we're all feeling that.
I'm sure.
Well, we
I mean,
could
do we
also
want
we
to?
don't
Do we?
we could revisit this
Do
the
we-
next meeting as well.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
we've made progress.
do you
I
want to
think
take
to do it justice, we should probably pick this up in our next meeting so that we're all very comfortable with how this is worded.
Yeah, I think so.
So should we make a motion to table the discussion to a definite decision next meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
What
moved.
is that?
Okay, second.
That's awesome. So let's go down the list. Member Amos,
Yes.
Member Christenbaum,
Yes.
Member Ayala,
Yes.
Member Woodland,
Yeah.
Member Bennett,
Yes.
Member Gustafson,
Yes.
Member Longolia,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Before we adjourn, let's just choose our next date for meeting, or before we take any motion to adjourn. What do people offer as a particular date?
Are we meeting every 2 weeks approximately?
We said every 2 to 4 weeks, depending upon our calendar schedule and what we have for our to-dos. I think we have plenty of to-dos to do, so it's really
So-
now going to be based on our availability.
2 weeks is the week of the 19th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The Thursday
have a
that
meeting
week is
that-
the 22nd. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
22nd.
right. The 22nd is the Thursday, if you keep it on Thursdays.
We can keep it on Thursdays, 22nd. Let me see for my schedule too.
It doesn't matter to me, but
I should be available on the 22nd. Does it work for everyone?
Should we go 3 weeks out? Do we need to do 2 weeks?
We can do 3 weeks. That's possible.
Bring it to the 29th?
That works for me.
That works for me.
That's fine.
Oh, I thought we were
Yeah.
trying to get something
done for the next
For-
meeting.
the next meeting, the
Oh,
school
yeah,
committee
that's
meeting. When's
true.
that? Then we
That's
might
the
need,
ninth.
November 9th.
yeah.
So 3 weeks might be too long.
So the 22nd.
When was that meeting in November? November
Wait,
9th?
no, that
Just in case.
we would
Yeah,
still have
we-
2 weeks.
We would still be good. Even if it was
Yeah.
the next week, we'd still be good because I can, everything goes out on Fridays typically.
So
Would
the
we
So-
want to
29th
move it
would
to
be
the
good?
27th? Sorry.
What did you say 29th would still be good? Brendan, or was it?
29th is good if that works for everyone. So
The 29th.
It works for me. I have something on the 27th. Someone said the 27th. I have a
Yeah,
conflict on the 27th.
My daughter's birthday is the 27th. I can't do that.
Okay. Oh, and Laura Kirschenbaum, did you happen to add that to your calendar just now?
I did.
Okay. Do you mind deleting that one just because it sent an invite to everybody? So
Oh,
I appreciate.
I'm so sorry.
I was like, wow, this is amazing. My calendar is very intuitive.
So we said the 29th.
I was confused. I was looking at it like, what? How did
Wow.
that get there?
The technology these days is incredible.
Okay.
But I will send out. Rebecca will send out the invite. But yeah,
Yep.
that was funny.
So the 29th, we said at 7.
29th at 7 p.m.
Okay.
That was funny.
Yeah. There's a CPAC event the 28th. So in case anyone is paying attention, but
Okay, thank you.
so it's good. It's not the same day.
That's good. I think we're ready for a motion.
Motion to
I move that
adjourn.
we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Let's go down the list. Member Amos,
Yes.
Member Christianbaum,
Yes.
Member Ayala,
Ayala, yes.
Member Woodland,
Woodland, yeah.
Member Bennett,
Yes.
Member Gustafson,
Yes.
Member Longolia,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Thank you, everyone. Have a good
Thanks
night.
all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.